This conference will now be recorded.
Wow, a hush fell across the room, so you must be expecting something to happen now. So thank you all for being here today. This is just such a critically important issue for our community. We are Greening USA. You're used to seeing John Presbiora up here. He normally organizes these things and serves as a host, and you have to settle for me today. I'm Diane Brandley. I'm president of Greening USA. And I'd like to welcome you all. A couple of quick things about Greening USA. We are a 501c3 New York State nonprofit. We are all 100% volunteers. We don't get a penny for what we do. So if you feel like we are providing a valuable service for our community, we have membership forms outside the door, and we would welcome your membership to help support our very small expenses. We also have an electronic newsletter. It's free. There are no strings attached. We don't share our mailing list. And if you would like to receive that newsletter, it has a pretty robust list of activities across upstate New York, and they're all sustainability related activities. I'd also like to thank the Syracuse Center of Excellence for hosting us in this beautiful building for years. It is a really valuable asset, and we appreciate it. Another thing that we like to do in our green bag lunches is to run around the room, everyone introduce themselves quickly. We have a lot of people here today, so just please, your name, and if you would like to divulge an affiliation, and that's it. So there is a microphone in the middle of the room. Should be picking up your voice, so if you speak in your big person voice, we should be able to hear you.
Very low with the office for mayor.
I'm Corey Driscoll, that I'm also with the office of mayor.
Barry Lentz, a Greening USA member.
Oh, Brett Kupperman, Northwestern Mutual.
Mary Kuhn, Democrat, running for county legislature. 7.
Justin Perkins, Office of Assemblyman Elster.
Assemblyman Elster.
Yushiso Blue Rock Solar.
Dave Ashley, Greening USA member and Emeritus partner, Ashley McGraw Architects.
Melanie Hale, also a member, but a former officer in Canopy, Advocates for Syracuse Green Spaces. Karen Rigney from the town of DeWitt.
Amberlynn Leja, intern for Mayor Ben Walsh.
Rennie Simone, intern for Mayor Ben Walsh.
Chris Carrick, Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board.
Olivia Green, Atlantic States Legal Foundation.
Carol Biesfire, member of Greening USA.
Linda Mallett, community organizer for the Alliance of Communities Transforming Syracuse.
Sarah Barnard, president-elect of the American Institute of Architects, Central New York.
Bob Haley, Greening USA member and AIA Syracuse.
Bill Chadwick, soon to be with Carrier Corporation again, as we split off from UTC and been in the community for many years and helped create this building.
Right.
Terry Weaver, Syracuse.com.
Naomi Himmons from Syracuse, New York.
Jeffrey Borney, freelance writer, film curator at ArtPage, and one of the pioneers who jump-started the current restoration project in Need of Board.
Ken Bobus, a member of Greening USA and Central New York AIA.
Tony Malavenda, I'm a candidate for the county executive position. Democratic candidate.
Cal Porter, Center State CEO.
Frederick County, Stafford County. Lindy Mendoza, Town Authority.
Bill Simmons, Syracuse Housing Authority.
Charlie Purcell, native Syracuse, and also Southside Team Sector 3.
Ebony Lonnie, sustainable consultant, and recent graduate of urban policies out at UOM.
Jack Nero, SUNY ESF, and the Neighbors of Onondaga Nation.
Meg Lau, Syracuse University Sustainability Management.
Alyssa Cadwell, Syracuse University Sustainability Management.
Connor Young, COE intern.
Luke Mucky, COE intern.
Peter King, Moving People Transportation Coalition.
Caroline Reed, current in real estate.
Sam Doubleday, Blue Rock Solar here in Syracuse.
Sean Stars, Cleaning Community, CNY.
Dave Babcock, suburbs for the Great Axe, Moving People, Town of Flint.
Teresa May, the Diocese of Syracuse.
Jean Cleese, Communications Director for Focus Greater Syracuse and Board, Citywide Board for TNT, Times and Liberties Today in Syracuse. Lindsay Spear, the Alliance for a Green Economy.
Lisa Warnicki, interested citizen.
Mitch Brickman, Green USA.
Chris Dobson, the Environmental Finance Center at Syracuse University.
All right, thank you. For people participating on our webinar, the mayor will take questions after his presentation is finished, so please type your questions in the chat box. And just as a disclosure, full disclosure, Greening USA endorses the community grid. We have signed on to that. That went to the governor. As a personal view, I live in the town of Salina, and I am for the community grid. My husband and I have lived here for 32 years in the town of Salina. We worked downtown for many, many, many years. During the time that the viaduct was closed down, we still made it to work with just a little delay. So when we travel, people ask us, where are you from? We don't say town of Salina, and we don't say Liverpool. We say Syracuse. It's our city. We're proud of it. It's a great place to live, and we want it to thrive. So with that, I believe Barry Lentz would like to say a few words.
Thank you. I just want to say briefly, for those of you who are frequent flyers at Green Bag Lunches, you'll remember that we've done several forums in the past couple of years on I-81. Those forums, those green bag discussions have primarily focused on sort of specific design, urban design issues. And so for today's forum, we thought it would be very important to be able to have the mayor speak about what are the critical issues that the city is looking at in responding to the DEIS. In saying that, I want to emphasize that what the mayor is going to do today with folks is to advance a dialogue and not make any statements that should be considered to be the official response of the city to the DEIS. We've still got months to go before we get to that point, so I just want to emphasize that, but it's a way of opening up a dialogue with folks here present so the mayor can hear your ideas of what you think the city might be focusing on as critical issues. The other thing I just wanted to briefly mention, there are handouts on the chairs in the front for folks in the back pews. I did not have enough handouts to go all the way in the back, but in the front seats, there's extra copies available. An item on the I-81 Cooperative's effort to develop a compendium of support for the community grid. So it's another way that each of you, especially those of you who represent organizations that may have not taken a position or signed on in support of a bill alternative, it's a way for you to participate as we move forward in assuring that we are able to demonstrate the kind of support that allows us to avoid unnecessary delays in moving forward with the whole I-81 project. So if you don't have one of those flyers and you would like to get one, there's ones available on the seats. So with that, I just would like to turn it over to the mayor. I'm sure he needs no introduction. You all know who the mayor of Syracuse is.
Thank you, Barry. Let me see if this one, is this microphone? Everyone hear me okay? Okay, we'll try that one. Need this one, so that's working. Great. Well, thanks, Barry, for the introduction, and Diane. Always welcome an opportunity to talk about this critically important project. I want to thank Greening USA for the opportunity to speak. I've had it on my list for a couple of years now to come join you all. I wasn't holding out for this opportunity, but glad I finally made it. And I want to acknowledge a number of individuals, but I just want to acknowledge all of you collectively. As I look around the room, a lot of the folks that I see in this room have really been on the front lines, not only on this issue, but on other critically important issues that impact our city and our region, particularly from a sustainability perspective. So thank you all for your collective advocacy and hard work. I do want to acknowledge Barry and his support of our administration's efforts to effectively engage on the 81 issue, both as it relates, you okay? No, it's okay. Both as it relates to the formal state DOT process, but also as it relates to the community at large. I want to thank Syracuse University and specifically the Center of Excellence for hosting us here. So my goal today is one, just to give you an update on our review of the DEIS. As Barry indicated, it is ongoing, and we will eventually submit formal comments. But this will give you a sense of what our thinking is to date. I do want to share some of the city's priorities above and beyond just the fact that we believe that the community grid option is the right option, both for the city and the region. And I want to hear from all of you. I want to make sure we have time for questions. So if at any point, those in the front row, if we're running short on time, please let me know. I want to acknowledge some of my partners in the public sector. We have Assemblyman Al Sturpey here. Al was an early voice advocating for the community grid. I want to thank Al for that. Also want to acknowledge Karen Rigney and in her role in being an elected official who also was an early advocate of the community grid. It's important to have partners in the public sector. As you heard, have members of my team here. Greg Lowe has really taken the lead on the 81 issue for us, for our administration. He's put in a lot of hard work and engaged with a lot of you. So I want to acknowledge Greg, Corey Driscoll Dunham, our interns. We have a great team at City Hall. So moving into the presentation and on the theme of acknowledgements, I wanted to start with the New York State DOT. The DOT has a very difficult job, and we can all second guess approaches. We can all second guess certain decisions made, but I hope that you all agree with my assessment that the state DOT has done a very good job stewarding us through this process. I'm sure they would be the first ones to admit the process has taken longer than we would all like, but they've been extremely thoughtful about it. They've been diligent. They've really done good, solid work. And for those of us that care about the data and the facts, they have presented them, all of those to us in a very effective and equitable way. So I want to acknowledge the DOT's work, not just in doing the hard work, but also listening and engaging, because we know that that's an important part of the process. Also on the topic of DOT, I want to point out something that's a specific section that's within the DEIS to reinforce what the DOT's job is. The term at the beginning of this statement that you see in front of you, it starts out based on a balanced consideration. That is a critically important point. It's easy for us to look at this issue solely through the transportation lens, solely through an economic lens, solely through an environmental or social or racial justice lens. But the job of the DOT is to look at it based on a balanced consideration. And it's very hard to get everyone to agree on each one of those considerations, but the DOT's job is to look at them comprehensively in a balanced way. And again, I believe that they've done that to date. So as I mentioned, I wanted to give you a quick update on our review of the DEIS. Again, we think, given where we are in the process, it's premature to make any final determinations related specifically to the DEIS, but what I can say is based on our review, and we've had a lot of help from a lot of subject matter experts as we've initiated our review as an administration. There's nothing in our analysis that has changed and specifically my opinion that the community grid option is the right option, again, not just for the city, but for the entire region. When the DEIS was released, we sat down as an administration with DOT and received a briefing. We have had follow-up correspondence with the DOT. We have a lot of city departments and city staff that are engaged on a number of different levels, but we've had an opportunity to bring city staff in front of DOT to ask specific questions from, again, everything from transportation to neighborhood and economic development to to emergency services. Again, we know that this project touches a lot of different components of what we do as a city. So as we've initiated this review of the DEIS, we've really broken it down into 6 areas that you see in front of you. Transportation, obvious. Construction effects, something that we need to be very conscious of, both in the short and the long term. On a related topic, energy, climate, noise, air, and ecology, all important elements. Indirect and cumulative effects. Some of the effects of this project are very obvious to all of us. Some of those are not, and we need to make sure that we're taking a comprehensive approach to all of the effects on our community, again, both in the short and the long term. Land use aesthetics, cultural resources, and acquisition. Land use is a very important topic, one that doesn't always get the same level of attention. I know that there are a number of folks in this room that are particularly interested in land use. And it's one thing to get the 81 project right in and of itself, but in order to ensure that we take full advantage of the opportunity, we need to make sure that we are achieving the highest and best land uses throughout the study area and beyond. And finally, again, socioeconomic issues and environmental justice, a critically important issue, particularly for those that live within the shadow of the viaduct. That is an area that we are spending a lot of time looking at. I do want to acknowledge the governor and specifically his comments just last week. To Governor Cuomo's credit, he has been always willing to talk to me about this issue. The first conversation I had with the governor after I was elected, when he called to congratulate me, I raised the issue of 81 and the importance of getting this right. And to his credit, he's continued to listen. And when asked about it last week, he stood behind the process, which I think was very important. He acknowledged that this has been a thorough assessment. He acknowledged that the community grid was identified as the preferred alternative and stood behind that process. But he also acknowledged that the process isn't over, that we're in the midst of the environmental assessment component of the process. We have to follow that process and respect that process. But again, I was encouraged and excited to see the governor's comments last week and welcome his continued partnership and support on this transformational project. So I want to talk a little bit more about the DEIS. I have tried to be consistent in encouraging everyone involved, regardless of your opinion, to be actively engaged in the process. I talked about the importance of the data and of the facts. And as we engage in the process, my only qualifier is if you are going to engage, do it in a productive and genuine way. The DOT has certainly done that, and they provided a lot of useful information. And unfortunately, some of those that have continued to share their opinions on this project have not availed themselves of all of the information that the DOT has provided. So in addition to reiterating my encouragement for everyone to engage in the process, again, it's important that everyone does that in a productive and genuine way. As an example, there are still discussions about the tunnel. The tunnel has been dismissed again and is no longer in consideration. You may not agree with that, but that's where we are in the process. And again, it's worth noting. Those that are trying to introduce new ideas, new concepts for solutions, that time has come and gone. It is not useful anymore to propose anything other than what is currently being considered by the DOT, and it's not productive to do so. And simply vowing to fight the process every step of the way is also not productive. Based on the conversations that I've had and the public dialogue that has taken place, I have not heard from anyone that believes that the no-build alternative or the repair and replace as it has been described is a good option. But that is a very real option that could result if those that are weighing in on this do so in unproductive ways. So it's okay to be, it's important to be engaged. It's okay to disagree with the DOT's preferred alternative, but again, it's important that everyone does it in a thoughtful and genuine way, because if they don't, and if we don't, the no-build alternative is again the worst case scenario, but a potential scenario. I don't want to lose sight of that. Nor do I want to lose sight of the fact that if we do this right, we are talking about a once in a generation opportunity to invest over $2 billion, not just in the heart of downtown, not just in the heart of the city, but in the heart of this region. Those opportunities don't come along very often. We need to make sure that we maximize that opportunity. So I want to talk a little bit about city priorities, above and beyond just that the community grid option is our preferred option. I want to be clear. My first priority is on those, as I mentioned before, that live within the shadow, literally and figuratively, of I-81. Those that are going to be most impacted by this project, both in the short term and the long term. There are a lot of opinions and stakeholders that we need to engage, but in my opinion, none more important than those that live along this stretch. Key issues for those individuals to think about. In the short term, displacement during construction. I know we have Bill Simmons in the back of the room representing Syracuse Housing Authority. I know this is something that he's spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about. Charlie Pearsall has been an effective voice for this neighborhood and for this constituency, and we need to continue to make sure that their voice is heard. There will likely be an impact to those individuals related to the construction, and we need to be sensitive to that and acknowledge that. In addition to just being displaced, air quality issues, noise impact, and how we can control and mitigate for that. Businesses that are directly impacted by this project. And again, we understand that those businesses extend far beyond just the city of Syracuse. The proximity to schools and parks, places where our constituents spend a lot of time, all need to be taken into consideration. Another issue that related to this that we want to make sure that we're focused on is where what's now being described in the report as Business Loop 81 travels through the city at grade. I certainly appreciate the fact that in identifying and designating Business Loop 81, I believe that was the DOT acknowledging some of the concerns that some stakeholders have had about losing their connection to Interstate 81, and I appreciate their efforts in that regard. That being said, I think that we can still accomplish that Business Loop 81 objective while doing it in a way that is sensitive to the neighborhoods that it is going through. We can't look at it in a linear fashion as only a road or a mode of transportation. We need to look at it through the context of the neighborhoods that it's bisecting, and how can we, from a planning perspective, even though we know that for those that are traveling on that road need to go straight through it, how can we break it up in a way that ensures that it fits in with the existing fabric of the neighborhoods that it's going through. As an example, we have, it isn't just the South Side and Syracuse Housing Authority. We have neighborhoods to the south of that, neighborhoods to the north of that, downtown. Those are all neighborhoods that have distinct character, distinct needs, and we need to make sure that as Business Loop 81 goes through there, that it's respectful of those needs. My colleague, Sharon Owens, our deputy mayor, was going to be here with us today, but this is an area where she is particularly focused and engaged, and I would encourage all of you to engage with her on those issues. I've talked a lot about the city and the area right along 81, but it is important to acknowledge the regional nature of this project. It does extend far beyond the borders of the city of Syracuse, and I have, I think, consistently said that unless we acknowledge and attempt to mitigate some of those regional concerns and issues, this project will not be successful. As we attempt to do that, I think it's important that we think beyond today and beyond the current pie that we're all operating with, both from an economic standpoint and beyond. We need to see this as an opportunity to grow. And so rather than trying to carve up the existing pie as it stands today, how can we increase the size of the pie so everyone can stand to benefit from this project? And I truly believe that everyone throughout the region can benefit from this project. Beyond what's described as the central study area, specific areas that have been identified that I have joined with my partners throughout the region to advocate for. We know our neighbors to the east are concerned about traffic along 481, specifically exit 3E and also Route 5. Those are issues that exist today. Those are issues that will exist regardless of what we do with 81. Might they be mitigated or exacerbated through this project? They might, which is why we need to acknowledge that they are in fact issues. But based on my conversations with the DOT, that specific issue is one that they're very much aware of and that they have committed to addressing both within and outside of the context of this project. Primarily outside, because again, it is an issue today and will be going forward. But it is an issue, and we want to acknowledge it. Salina, Diane, you mentioned you're in Salina. We understand that certain businesses have built their existing business models on the existing highway network. We can't ignore that fact. Again, I think the more that we're thinking about how we increase the size of the pie, the more we're thinking about how we can introduce new investment opportunities that these businesses stand to benefit from, the more we can hopefully help our neighbors in Salina to understand the opportunity associated with the community grid. And certainly to the west and to the south, we hear quite a bit about concerns around truck traffic. Again, an issue that exists today, and if left unaddressed, will exist regardless of what we do with 81. It doesn't minimize those issues, but it's an opportunity, I think, to use this dialogue, to use this project to address those issues once and for all. And again, based on my conversations with DOT and with the state, they have expressed a willingness to work with us and work with the communities directly impacted by it to attempt to address those issues. So again, this is a regional project. It is primarily focused in the city of Syracuse, but as the mayor of the city, I have continued to reach out to our neighbors, to my fellow elected officials in each one of those municipalities, and offer to be a partner in addressing their concerns. I think it's also important to note that the way that you do that is by coming around the table and working on those issues, not through press conferences, which all too often has been the way that some have chosen to voice their concerns and their opposition. Not all. I have municipal officials in surrounding towns and villages that are actively engaged already at the table, and I would like to use this opportunity to invite everyone again to come around the table to really start working through these issues and begin talking with each other as opposed to at each other. Another area that perhaps has not received as much attention, but is one that is certainly a priority of ours, is around the area of workforce. We know that there are going to be hundreds of jobs created over multiple years associated with this project, and we need to take full advantage of this opportunity. While I acknowledge that we've all been frustrated by the length of time that this process has taken, I have tried, as I always do, to put a positive, optimistic spin on it and to note that if the project were to happen tomorrow, I don't believe from a workforce perspective that we as a community would be fully prepared to take full advantage of that opportunity. So we have tried very intentionally to use this time to prepare our community to maximize the benefit of the workforce development opportunities associated with this project. One way in which we've done that is through the creation of Syracuse Build. It's an initiative that I announced at my first State of the City and that we are actively working on. You may have not heard a lot about it since, but that doesn't mean that we haven't been hard at work. For those of you that are not familiar with Syracuse Build, for all intents and purposes, it's a construction training, workforce development, and local hiring program. In order to make sure that we are taking the appropriate steps, one of the critical components is understanding what that workforce opportunity truly looks like. It's easy to say, well, we know we're going to have construction jobs, but if you look beyond just the 81 project, which we will have a limited ability to influence from a workforce perspective, we're certainly going to do everything we can. It goes well beyond that. For that reason, we have engaged with what we're describing as anchor partners, namely to start Syracuse University in Onondaga County, to identify what projects they have in the pipeline, both related to the 81 project and beyond, that we can begin working with them on identifying those opportunities, identifying the gaps in our workforce, and going about filling those gaps. So we are currently engaged with our partners at Interstate CEO through a grant from the Balmer Fund to do that in-depth analysis on the workforce development opportunities in the coming years. Once we get through that analysis, we will again focus on that gap analysis. We've engaged with local trades that are ready and willing partners to help us identify those training opportunities, those apprenticeship opportunities that can help fill some of those gaps. But again, we're trying to take full advantage of the time here that we have to make sure that we're preparing our workforce not only for the jobs directly associated with this construction project, but for the many jobs that we believe are going to follow this construction project. Just to recap on priorities, and then I want to open it up to questions. Again, I want to reinforce that while this is a regional project and there are many important needs that need to be taken into consideration, none more important than those that live within the shadow of this viaduct. I'm going to continue to repeat that. Beyond that, again, we not only need to acknowledge the concerns of our regional neighbors, we need to work actively to help mitigate those concerns, and I'm committed to doing that. Our workforce, again, we need to make sure that we take full advantage of this opportunity. As it relates to the DEIS, again, it's an ongoing process. We've engaged many of you in the process already. For those of you that we haven't, we encourage you to follow up with us, touch base with Greg, touch base with Corey. If you believe that you have subject matter expertise, if you have thoughts that you didn't hear us and me address today, we welcome your insight and your guidance in this process. It's cliche to say, but we truly are all in this together, and $2 billion investment opportunities don't come around very often. And I am myopically focused on ensuring that we do everything we can to take full advantage of this opportunity. Again, not just for the city, but the entire region. With that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions or comments. Thanks. Chris.
One thing I don't know that I've heard a lot about, so I'm obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but I'm an advocate for community risk. I live in the city, and the one thing I haven't heard a lot about is during construction, and I don't know if you have either, during construction certainly, but also maybe when the community grid is built, has there been any modeling or any thought to how traffic is going to thread through the city? So I live in outer Comstock, right? I can imagine people coming from the south, and there's a lot of people coming from the south getting off Adams Street now, who might get off Rock Cut Road and thread through Jamesville and Comstock Ave to get to the institution. So I guess I'm wondering if there's been any modeling to see where that traffic's going to flow, and if there's going to be any kind of community benefit money that the DOT might provide to upgrade city street networks to support that traffic.
Yeah, great questions. I will again acknowledge that there are a lot of subject matter experts in this room, and if anyone wants to add to my response, I encourage you to do so. I think on the modeling side, in looking through the DEIS, DOT has done some traffic modeling that gives us, at least begins to answer some of the questions that you've asked, but I think candidly there is more that needs to be done. That's one of the reasons why we've had our staff, particularly at Department of Public Works and our transportation staff, engaging with the DOT to identify those concerns, those potential choke points or challenges that we have. I would encourage other municipalities to do that as well. That's again why I stress the importance of being at the table. If you're just fighting and resisting against the process, you're going to miss a significant opportunity to be at the table to address those concerns. I know we've talked with the institutions, including Syracuse University, about what that looks like on the other side of the hill, and how the traffic moving along 481 and around Rock Cut Road might impact the campus. So conversations are happening. Some of that modeling has been done, but I believe a lot more has to be done in order for us to fully understand the impacts. Anybody want to add to that? Wow, lots of people. Like I said, lots of experts. Barry and then Bob.
Yeah, just one of the issues that's come up that we've actually had a fair amount of discussion about that folks might be aware of, but that once traffic starts being rerouted, that puts demands on infrastructure that the existing infrastructure may not be prepared to handle. So, there's been discussions about that and looking into how we deal with that to make sure that those infrastructure improvements actually occur before traffic gets rerouted, and how the best way to go ahead and do that is, and who's going to pay for it, et cetera.
Basically, I was just going to add that in the extensive appendix of this 15,000-page document, there are construction sequencings for each phase of every part on each option. They can be found in the appendix section under construction sequencing. That's what the DOT has said so far. I can't address if they've done exact modeling to your question.
Ken Bovis, I'm a city resident at outer Comstock area, and I voted for you.
Thank you. It worked.
And I think you're doing a wonderful job. Thank you very much. Thanks. With regard to what Chris mentioned just earlier, and I'm not sure if he's alluding to the Fillmore, the Loretto interchange. Is that what we're talking about? Because I questioned it too, and I don't have a pony in the game here, but it just seemed like an odd place to create the first interchange as you're coming north on 81. And part of the plan that I saw at a number of presentations, and I spoke at length with Mark Frechette about this, that there's no direct access for the people, and I'm totally devoted to the grid. I want to make that clear. But I would sympathize with the folks in DeWitt who would be commuting on what is now 481, but once it's 81, they'll have to get off at that interchange. There's no more connection directly to the loop from the current 481, which that exists now, but won't exist in the plan. And also, as they commute to the city from the suburb, they also return home in the evening, and there's no connection on the loop going south, connecting directly to what is 481 now. So, and then I'm looking at, this is Loretto involved, and it's Loretto's land that would be involved. And it's Fillmore Avenue, and Fillmore Avenue is this 2-block, it's not an avenue, it's just a 2-block street, very steep hill that leads to Salina Street, from this interchange, if you're trying to get, on the street level, where the Burger King is. And it just seemed pretty awkward, this whole thing. Yeah. And I'd hate to see that reverberate in DeWitt. I don't know how many people in DeWitt realize that's the situation, and Jamesville and so forth.
Yeah, point well taken. Other questions? Chris?
Mayor, I'm really concerned about the new proposed interchange at Krause and Irving. And I'm really concerned that we're exchanging one choke point at Harrison and Adams for a new one.
With 690.
With 690.
Yeah.
And the ability of Krause to handle all of that traffic going up to University Hill. I know there are some proposed, revamping of Krause Avenue, but that to me is a serious problem. So I don't know what the city has done to look at that, or if you've taken a position or expressed any concern about that.
we've certainly looked at it, and haven't taken a formal position on it yet, but the point's well taken. Something that we'll definitely address.
Just my soapbox, it just seems to be more of the standard sort of transportation engineering mindset solution, rather than looking for alternatives. So.
The question of how long the project takes and the discussion of your traffic flow until the construction starts and any opportunity for the big picture of light rail that would go from, let's say, OCC to the airport and from Wegmans in the west to Wegmans in DeWitt and crossing the city. And I have people who tell me that their family members who go to OCC on public transportation takes hours.
Yeah.
And again, just the bigger picture beyond the viaduct as to what, if any, light rail would fall into the conversation.
It's a great point. I think that in our conversations that we've had, that we do feel that other means of transportation, particularly public transportation, is an area that probably hasn't been focused on enough. To the extent it has been in City Hall, we've primarily been focused on a bus rapid transit system based on the work that SMTC has done, which would directly address the issue around OCC as you identified. So realistically, BRT seems like the appropriate next step in the evolution of public transportation in Syracuse. But I think it's always important to think long-term and think big picture. And to the extent folks want to look at light rail and talk about it, I'm not opposed to that. But BRT is really where we're focused right now. In addition to just supporting Central in general and enhancing existing routes. Any other questions?
Hi there. I understand change is very difficult for lots of people, and I don't know what the extent of your conversations with mayors and supervisors from towns and what that's really been like. But do you think that, and also realizing all things are political, do you really think that the press conferences and all those things they keep having, that they really believe that they are going to change this to something different, or are they just doing it because they hear a lot from constituents?
That's a good question, Al, and it's a dangerous question because I don't want to assume that I know what people's intentions are. I will say this. You're right. They're inherently, as long as you and I are in the positions that we're in and want to continue to be in those positions, there is a political, if you want to characterize it as such, a political element to this, or at least, but if you look at it a different way, it is our job to represent the interests of those that we serve, right? And the priorities of those that we serve. I also think it's our job to educate and inform those that we serve in areas where they may not have the capacity to engage at a level that we would like. And I take that obligation very seriously. Regardless of what the true intentions of those that have continued to resist sincere engagement in this process, my fear is, and it may be what some have in mind. My fear is that the end game isn't a different option. It's just delay, maintaining the status quo to a point where we've repaired and replaced so much. The state finally says, well, we just can't justify spending $2 billion if we've spent X amount over the past 10, 20 years just doing repair and replace. So again, whether that's intentional or unintentional, it's a real risk that I'm concerned about. But again, I will just reinforce it. I think for those that are concerned about the process, that don't feel the process is headed in the right direction, the most effective way to have their concerns addressed is by engaging in the process, not resisting the process. Make sure we get
Let me
new
get
hands.
someone different. Did you have a hand?
No, but I will anyway.
Oh.
You mentioned the racial justice issues there, and you know the history of 81. You know, it was when it was built, it destroyed an African American community, and you know I think there's concerns about that could happen again. And so, what are you doing, or what do you see going forward to prevent that?
So again, I want to acknowledge that there are folks in the room, particularly Mr. Pearsall, who can speak to it a lot more effectively than I can. I'll share with my perspective. That is it's a real concern. I think that we need to be very intentional in not only how we're addressing this particular project, but how we're addressing other projects. One of the related projects that we've been spending a lot of time on lately is this Blueprint 15 initiative, working with the Syracuse Housing Authority to repurpose and reinvest in the housing authority's existing properties. I think if the market is left to its own devices and the project is left to its own devices, it would likely result in displacement and some form of gentrification. So we do need to be intentional about it. I think that we are, certainly in how we're addressing Blueprint 15 and ensuring that that this development it does cover a mix of incomes. We also need to be engaging with residents that do face potential displacement, whether it be in the short term or the long term, and actively work towards other housing options. As a city in general, we do not have a sufficient supply of quality, affordable housing. And we're looking at this project and other related projects as an opportunity to increase our affordable quality housing stock, both within this particular focus area and beyond. So yeah, we have to be very intentional in how we do this. Otherwise, I think you're right that we risk just repeating the mistakes of the past, whether it's intentional or unintentional.
I was just going to say one suggestion is just to talk about what happened before.
Yep.
And make it part of the discussion.
Good. Yeah. I think Charlie wants to add to that.
One second, I just wanted to announce for anyone in the room who wants to pass this on, Green USA is recording this. It will go up on our YouTube channel. So if you have friends who want to hear what was talked about in here today, please have them.
Great, thanks.
My name is Charlie Pearsall, and to address your issue about racial inequality, we, for the first time in the history of this coming down, because when it first started, we didn't have any representation. Well, we have a young lady by the name of Lanessa Owen Chaplin. She's a lawyer from the ACLU and Civil Liberty of New York. And she represents the minority community, the African American community, or any type of injustice that's coming. I work with her on a volunteer basis. I go out in the community every weekend and we canvass. We started down at McKinley Manor, all the way up from Adams Street, all the way up to Brighton. We canvass every weekend that the weather prevails us to get out there and camp. We knock on doors, we talk to the community, we talk to the people as volunteers. We don't have that many, but we're out there constantly. And I've been working with her for about 6 months now for the same things that you're talking about, because we know it's documented that it was a prejudicial issue. But our main concern about this whole situation is the human rights violation that happened to a group of people, underprivileged people. So with that, she's litigating things for us, even with the Department of Transportation. We're looking now for them to have set aside some money for people that look like me, can work and support for them, but we're looking to get paid too also for that, because they got money to set aside to pay people. Because it's just like me, if something's going on Skinny Atlas, I go to Skinny Atlas looking like I'm looking, I'm not going to be respected out there by myself. But if you come along with me and you live there, then we can communicate with our people as a whole on a human issue versus being prejudiced and stuff. So I think, and we are doing that in this city. I was born and raised here. I went through this stuff. I was young at the time, but my mom and stuff, I can remember when they started doing 81 out there in Liverpool. I lived off on 7 North Street, and the surveyors came out in 57, 56. So, so it destroyed a community that, yes, we did have some property in that community, but we also had a lot of homeowners, a lot of businesses and stuff, and all of those were destroyed. And we want those back. And with the lawyer helping us now, because we got someone that has legal experience on what took place now, and they're representing us. So the answer, I hope that answers your question.
I won't bore you with my concerns, but thank you, Ben, for doing this. I think you're the man for the job during this time period, because this is a very difficult job that you have. And we all feel for you what you're going through in terms of public safety with the police chief and going through all the changes there. But that's a positive example of dealing with an issue the right way.
Thanks.
In my view, as a former local government person. And so bringing that professionalism to the table, learning from other local governments can only inform and help improve the situation. I won't bore you with my infrastructure questions about how is this going to impact water, sewer, gas,
Big
electric?
questions.
How can you leverage this to get broadband, IT, addressed so we know where it is? We all know the connective corridor war stories about the utilities underground. How can we make sure those things don't happen?
And rest
so things
assured,
are
we're
expeditious.
Yeah, we are asking all those questions.
Back to, though, how to address this issue of the people that are fighting and protesting and not engaging in the process. I just want to mention Linda Irwin walked in, who's another elected official, since you acknowledge them, representing the city.
Always
to the
happy to
legislature.
acknowledge Linda.
And we didn't plan it this way, but I'm just wondering, how are you leveraging the county to really go out? You've got so many towns and villages, so many local governments, so many different groups. It really comes down to one-on-one relationships in my experience over the decades.
Yeah.
How are you just going out? You're gonna have to reach out to them. Can you leverage the county? They've got more manpower, more money to go out and, sit down and talk with people in those communities. I know DOT has had meetings there, and probably some of the local electeds have attended those meetings, but really sit down. I know Ryan McMahon told me that one of his initiatives, he has a new director of the Syracuse Onondaga Planning, Dan, and he told Dan one of his priorities is Dan's got to go out and talk to each of those communities about land use planning. And how can the county help with that? Well, this seems like a perfect opportunity to also address, sewer and these other matters to really, why not put some SU Maxwell interns out there and get them out there talking to people? This needs a lot of mobilization
for sure.
of people, and why not utilize the county and just the horsepower they can bring to the table.
Agreed. Yeah, it's a great point. Again, on all those infrastructure issues, those are questions that we're actively or conversations we're actively having both internally and with state DOT and with the county, also taking this opportunity to inventory all of our infrastructure and assets to make sure that we do know what's under the ground and where there will be opportunities to invest. And to the county executive's credit, he stood with me the day that the DEIS was released to say that, and now we need, we've been waiting for it. We've been expressing our opinions. That important step has taken place, and now we need to sit down and work together to work through some of those issues. And he's done that. Congressman Kako and I have had a number of conversations. He understands that he has an important role to play from the federal government perspective, largely as it relates to funding. And to his credit, he held those community meetings. He's listened. He continues to listen. So even if we don't share the same opinion, I'm confident that we have the right relationships and we're having the right conversations to make sure the right thing happens. Lindsay.
I'm curious what opportunities there are in the redevelopment. Like, I know at the moment we're focused on creating the community grid, but that's going to create a fair amount of space that's going to be redeveloped. And what opportunities there are within the EIS process to help influence that, and then what opportunities are there beyond that? And then particularly, the one piece I just want to plant a seed for is thinking about, again, it's building on the infrastructure, geothermal community loops. How do we build for the 21st century energy needs? And how can we build a built environment that is carbon neutral?
Yeah, great point. And that's something that I want to work towards. I think your point is well taken on the geothermal. Anytime we're digging up the ground, there's an opportunity there, and I think we need to maximize those opportunities. We've talked a lot about, and going to your land use question, that's an area where we feel that we at least have a good foundation to work off of in some ways through the land use planning that we've done in the city, and particularly the rezone process that we're advancing, at least as it relates to privately owned properties. I think admittedly where we have more work to do is in the right of way, and having a plan and a vision for what our future right of way looks like, both above ground and underground. And again, it's something that we certainly intend to address through the DEIS process, but also address internally to make sure we're prepared for what comes. So points very well taken.
Hi, my name's Peter King. I'm from Otter Comstock, and I like the way the administration has been taking an open perspective, collaborative instead of conflict, and making things more public rather than hidden conversations. But to build on the thing that people mentioned about racial disparities, economic disparities, I'd like to address one issue that may be kind of a social blind spot, which is air quality. I think we're used to in this community people living in direct proximity to really harmful stuff, and it just becomes an assumed thing, and everybody just thinks it's okay. But then when you look at asthma maps, I mean, downtown has a disproportionately high population of white people with asthma, so it's even agnostic to race. I'm wondering if there's a way to bring that into the conversation. The things we can do, including following the main recommendation, was the community grid. I think another thing is of course public transit. I think I would agree that public transit can be brought in more. I'm wondering if the administration is looking at this at all.
Yeah. So absolutely, we are certainly going to address air quality through the DEIS process, but beyond that, something I haven't talked about today, but I like to talk about is our Smart Cities initiative, and specifically our Smart Streetlight project that is currently underway. As part of that project, we already have the resources to deploy a certain number of sensors on some of these lights to do a lot of different things, but one of the areas that we've been looking at is how do we utilize that network and those assets to monitor air quality. So that's one of the that's towards the top of our list of ways in which we want to leverage that investment. And I think that there's really interesting things that we can do there as it relates both to 81 and also identifying other factors that are contributing to air quality throughout the city. So again, will be certainly addressed through our participation in the DEIS, but something that we're already looking at well beyond that. Mm-hmm.
Hi. Inclusion.
Yes, sir.
The Urban Job Task Force did a survey on the disparity of jobs within the community. In short, Ben, Black people are not working.
Right.
Okay. We have to do something about it.
Right.
I just heard you say something about training.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, right now I got 10 young men at my shop training and learning. We've been doing this on our own.
Yeah.
On our own. No funding, out there grinding, trying to the best of our ability to help these guys remove the barriers that stop them from gainful employment.
Right.
And I'm 60 years old now, Ben. I'm 60. I can't keep doing this by myself.
Right.
When am I going to get some true help? When am I going to get assistance? We have helped over 800 young men get jobs. We have not gotten a dime, not even a piece of paper, Ben, to help us in this plight. Now you have this coming up, And I have to look at those statistics to where there is no inclusion of African American men and women on these jobs.
Yep.
When is it going to change?
So I will take this as an opportunity to plug Hope for Us Housing. You guys have been doing really amazing work for a long time. To your point, on your own. I will say that as we've taken on as Syracuse Build, one of our objectives has been to not try and reinvent the wheel and to engage with partners that are already in the community doing this kind of work. So apologies for not having that conversation sooner, but between Greg and I, we'll make sure we follow up and figure out where you may fit into our initiative. You're right that, when you look at the report that the Urban Jobs Task Force put out, it shows that even with the best of intentions, without actually doing the work in a comprehensive, holistic way, the results are far from adequate. So our goal is to certainly try to do a better job of engaging with stakeholders that are already doing that training and doing that work in the community. I mentioned the building trades. I should have mentioned also the nonprofit organizations like you guys that are doing it. We also need to do it accomplish it on a policy level. We need to raise the bar for our local labor policies, local hiring policies, make sure that that folks that live in the communities where these projects are happening have a first bite at the apple here, have an opportunity to work there. So points well taken, challenge accepted. Greg wants to add something.
Just active note, Mayor, that there is regular cooperation with UJTF in the planning of Syracuse Build with Urban Jobs Task Force and leveraging the findings of the REIS. So I do think that help is already starting to build, and we'll connect to make sure it gets directly to you soon, but the UJTF involvement is significant.
Just a quick question about, you talked about air quality management. What about during construction?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That has to be part of the conversation as well.
That's part of the DOT is looking at that.
Absolutely, yeah. And again,
living right there, that with everything coming up is going to be really bad.
For sure, absolutely, and we will directly address that in our comments into the DIS as well.
Thanks. I wanted to pick up on something Lisa mentioned, though she said she didn't want to get into it in detail since it's boring, so I apologize if this is boring. But it's the stormwater runoff and wastewater infrastructure implications of whatever's done with I-81. Hopefully it's the grid. At Atlantic States, we work closely with the county on combined sewer issues. And I don't know if a lot of people are aware, I-81 closely parallels Onondaga Creek. Most of the worst sewer sheds are right there. The ones that are triggering 20 plus times a year in Onondaga Creek are a large result of I-81 and that big concrete umbrella that it is. Yep. As I understand, DOT is committed to whatever alternative it is, now this community grid, will be stormwater runoff neutral, and they'll manage it as an MS4 on their own, which is great. And hopefully there's going to be, with the grid, lots more opportunities to make it a green street and more, green infrastructure. But they made, as I understand it, they made similar commitments with the recent construction on 690, Teal Ave. That was supposed to be stormwater neutral, and it ended up not being quite stormwater neutral. So how can we make sure they follow through on those commitments, even if it gets, prohibitively expensive or very difficult to manage? As an MS4, we need to hold them to that.
I totally agree. I was thrilled when I first learned of the objective to make it stormwater neutral. I had not heard that 690 did not turn out that way. So we'll take this opportunity to look into it, to learn from it, and make sure it doesn't happen again. Because it's in so many ways, this is a once in a generation opportunity, and that is certainly applicable to stormwater as well.
Yeah, and if there's estimates that taking I-81 down will have just as much, if not more, water quality benefits than the entire Save the Rain
Right,
project.
yeah. That's something.
One of the things that I think is useful for people to be aware of, because you might have an opportunity to impact this, is with respect to the 690 issue. DOT is very concerned about what happened with 690, the Teal Street interchange, et cetera, because that started out as a traditional sort of design RFP build project, but got changed to a design build project. When that happens, depending on how the RFP gets written, et cetera, the person who's doing the design build project is able to make all kinds of changes. And so there are lots of changes to that project that DOT was not happy with. Now, I don't know specifically if the stormwater was one of them, but I would suspect that it is. Going forward, the reason why it's important to be aware of that is we want to make sure that this project, if aspects do become design build, that the RFP and the specifications are written so that they can't fundamentally change basic issues of it. So that's something that the public can have input into in responding to the DIS and DOT. And so just, again, two other quick comments again, about things that you folks can do to impact this. With respect to the mass transit and the BRT issue, Moving People has been having ongoing conversations with SMTC and Centro about that. Heretofore, Centro has largely maintained that they don't have to do anything or they can't do anything until the record of decision, so that they essentially have been sort of on the sidelines. We've been working to try and get them off the sidelines because SMTC and others do actually believe that there is a real opportunity for some mass transit funding to be associated with this, and in particular the prospect of BRT, but also there's going to have to be park and ride options during construction. In doing those, we want those to be done in a way that builds out a platform that can be permanent so that people can use park and ride afterwards. The other thing, again, in terms of the kind of input or impact that folks can have is, let me just see, which one was that? Oh, yeah, so just with respect to the county issue and how can we leverage support or engagement from county folks, I did just want to mention, Karen, maybe you want to say something about this, Karen Rigney, there is a Suburbs for the Community Grid group. They are getting organized to do outreach to people in suburban areas. And if you're interested in becoming participating in that process, talk to Karen.
Mayor, thank you very much. And thanks to Greening USA for the sustainable concepts that you're bringing forward as a large, long-term planning issue that should be prioritized when one deals with an infrastructure that we're going to use for the next 50 years. Along that line, as an academic in architectural, you always try and solve the problem, but the first goal is to identify the problem. This is a long-term infrastructure, as our mayor has said. We all know this. However, the public furor, whether it's media showing past schemes such as bridges with lights on them, or whether it's rekindling old concepts that are no longer in the process. One of the biggest problems, I'm going to try and end this statement. One of the biggest problems is the process itself. There's enough money that the DOT has had aside for their planning that if we could have had 2% of it, 1% of it for some of these agenda here as part of the planning process. This is what's wrong with the process, whereby the DOT has the control of even identifying the problem. I'm going to back out and say a couple of very simple things. The county executive, and I've asked him this personally, you don't have a proactive plan from your towns and villages about the benefits of this option in terms of economic and physical development. Smart growth planning and smart street concept, but smart growth planning can happen in every town and village intersection outside the city's limits and improve their economic development based on this infrastructure. Yet we have not one plan, and DeWitt's the leader in terms of sustainable planning, but no specific plan showing the benefits of the community grid to each of these towns and villages. So there's a misrepresentation of the inertia of public opinion, and it's unfair to the process. I'm going to stop, but there's so many things this group can do as a large group. First of all, we need huge amounts of public opinion to support this. When I went to, I think, all but one of the public meetings, a lot of people were at those tables writing their comments. I don't think they were in favor of the community grid. the public written record and the public inertia has to be huge to pull the community grid for a long-term 50-year plan.
Agreed.
Okay, Elsie.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for all your support today on this.
Did you had something else? Nope. Karen?
Yes, I just want to give a little more what Barry was just talking about. And as Bob just mentioned, we do need a lot of support, making sure that there is no doubt about the fact that this is the direction the DOT has suggested to us. We agree. We're going to. They've done their due diligence. It is time to move forward. And if so, at the moment, we're working on trying to collect written records of people through petitions and other cards that will show support from the suburbs. Because unfortunately, it's turned into this dichotomy of, suburbs versus city. And we in the suburbs know that's not true. So we need a written record of it. So I am appealing to everyone here that if you know any businesses, if you know friends, relatives, or whatever who live in the suburbs, we need their signature if they would help us with this. So you can come to me afterwards and I could get your email and send you information that you could use, petitions, etc. Thank you.
Thanks. It's like we're up to round 2 here for everybody. Brett.
The small piece of news of Destiny having a lobbyist who's in your description, maybe just delaying the process. And I imagine that there isn't anybody who has lobbied for the grid or is paying a professional lobbyist for the grid. If there is, that small piece of news missed my search. But I guess I'm just curious
too.
Yeah.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Not that we're aware
Carry
of.
on.
So I guess I'm just kind of curious whether it's the whatever color squirrel elephant in the room. How big of a concern or weight is here we are with a major economic engine in our community who's got a professional lobby working on the grid not happening or being delayed.
Yeah, so I will start by acknowledging my bias because my father happens to be a lobbyist, and I think he's a pretty good guy. Yeah. So he does happen to share my opinion on the grid, but that's in his personal capacity. No, so listen, I think that is it relevant? Sure. And is the opinion of Destiny USA relevant in this conversation? Yes. We've had conversations with them. I think if I'm being fair, like I said, relative to other businesses, there are certain businesses that have built that their business model revolves around the current configuration of the highways. They would suggest that they are one of those. And if they have the means, I can't blame them for hiring someone that can at least ensure that their position or that their concerns are accounted for. So I don't think it's inconsistent with the way they've approached any issue that they think has an impact on their business. I'm not reading too much more into it than that. The DOT's process is a proven process based on the law. So unless the process is inherently flawed, I have enough faith in the system that I don't believe that one lobbyist or one stakeholder can change, can impact the process in that kind of way. Some might suggest I'm naive, but I do believe that, and I'm not overly concerned. They're certainly going to make sure their voice is heard throughout the process.
So one thing we know is the DOTs do like design build, and one of their leaders mentioned to me that they are looking at design build for this process. So being able to competently be involved each step of the way is going to be a huge part of it, if that does indeed occur. But it seems to me it comes back to, regardless of, that I don't know about the issue of the disagreements and all, but what's really missing to me is what it seems like the professionalism to be applied. The driver's seat is with the state, because the local government capacity, professionalism, competence is not strong enough, as it would be in perhaps other communities where they've had more of a modern approach to governing and professionalism over time. One of the big things we're lacking in this area is an urban planning program in the academic level. I guess it was eliminated at SU back in the 60s, 70s or something. So nowhere is an urban planning. So people they go to ESF to get landscape architecture's degree. We all know Sam Gordon, and he should be, we feel as though he could be cloned and put in other places. But the bottom line is that a lot of towns and villages have no professional input to their land use decision-making process. And as we know, land use decision-making is permanent. We've all lived through it at some point in our lives. So how do we improve that competence both here and beyond? Nobody's got it right, but we're not increasing our professional competence in Central New York in terms of urban planning or public administration, in terms of placement. How do we make sure, because those are the tools that are going to be needed at every step of this process, whether it comes down to detour signs, dealing with emergencies, public safety, public health, getting to the hospitals. We need more competence. We need to learn from other places. We don't need to have this be another on-the-job training program in Central New York.
So points well taken, Lisa. I am going to disagree with you slightly. I agree that those are all necessary and important. I disagree that we haven't made any progress in those areas. I believe we have. Even going back to the previous mayoral administration, I came in when Mayor Minor started in 2010. At that point, the city had no planners on staff whatsoever. We do now. You mentioned the head of SACPA, Dan Kwasnowski. That is a joint appointment by the mayor and the county executive. It was made under previous county executive Joni Mahoney. It was to Joni's credit, she recommended Dan, who happens to be a professional planner. And while that could easily be a political appointment, that we chose for it not to be that. And I know as Ryan has come into the job, I think we're all excited about what he brings to the table and his ability. I know Ryan in particular is excited about his ability to build the capacity of the towns and villages to plan more effectively. And as it relates to public administration, I'm a proud Maxwell MPA alum, and Dean Van Slyke can tell you I'm not hesitant to pick up the phone and call him and ask for their help. So progress, yes. More work to be done, yes. Thanks.
Double their staff.
All right, we have time for just one more question. Sorry.
Mayor, my name is Abdul Alameen. University of Albany.
Okay.
We have one of the top urban regional planning programs in the country. There's only 7 schools in the U.S., New York State, that are recognized by the planning board. Every spring we have a spring meeting up at ESF, and a person was unable to make it today. And that's what I wanted to introduce you to, because what we've been doing is bridging the gap between the best of Albany and the best of Syracuse. But we believe in going from Albany, Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo. Personally, I'm supporting an alternative for the tunnel because it addresses all the problems that these people have. But as I said before, you don't force somebody to accept something. You just show them how it has to be inclusive.
Right.
Because Syracuse is just a part of it. You got the whole Northeast. And DOT got to do what's in the best economic development for the whole Northeast, but you can't do it at the expense of the local neighborhood. So when you can bring those people together in the collaboration, the communities on the other counties benefit, just like we did the Erie Canal.
Yep.
So hopefully I can get back to you, Albany, and get with some of my colleagues, and we can help solve your problem.
Yeah, we welcome the collaboration.
You're with APA? You're with APA?
There's one more question up. Did you have a question?
It's a question and a comment, and I admit I was away from Syracuse for 10 years. I worked in Massachusetts, and this is sort of amplifying. Why is this not working? Amplifying what Bob just said about how we really help people be educated on why it is of people's best interest. And I'm thinking about opportunities to have world cafes or charrettes where people really can see the broad scope and how you come to something with just your bias or your perspective and you think you're hurting me because I'm not getting what I think I need. Right. But you have to draw a picture. And so I don't know if that has happened. I've gone to many forums where it's just people offering comment, sort of like this, but not really connecting all the dots. So I'm hoping maybe as we move forward, thinking with out of suburbs, et cetera, if there are opportunities that we can utilize to really grow why this is so important and perhaps connect the people who just can't or won't see it.
Yeah, good points, and we'll certainly reinforce those with DOT.
So I'd like to thank the mayor and his staff for this. And all of you for this great conversation. So many passionate people in the audience. And we will just continue the conversation. And once again, reminder, we've recorded this. If you go to Greening USA's YouTube channel, if you want to rehear something that you missed, by all means, and pass that information on to your friends and relatives. So let's thank the mayor.
Thank you, everybody.
No. In what you saw, did they say anything about coming up 81 to Route 20 to go to Seneca Meadows? Oh, yeah, yes. That was in there too, because they keep saying, don't go on 20, and they're gonna take away the connection to get there. They have addressed that in some of the okay, but I can't recall this being specifically the truck issue. That's changed quite a bit. The truck was agreed to the current plan is not very good.